So we can start the open mic session. You can either put your question or comment into the chat box, or you can raise your hand or speak. So David, did you have a comment or question? I noticed you're, oh, okay, all right. Okay. So while people get their thoughts moving, I just wanted to comment that in terms of the findings, you know, it's occurred to me and others, and I'm sure every other member of the steering committee, that the findings, the purpose of them isn't only to bring them forth to the PAC. The purpose is to kind of express an issue or a problem that the community has. And we do, in fact, interact with organizations or entities other than the PAC. We interact sometimes with professional societies to let our concerns be known, such as DPS or AGU. We also talk among ourselves. The ag chairs do talk among ourselves. So I think that what we will do is put together findings that not only will be brought forth to the PAC, but things that express a record of the concerns we have for the community. Okay, we're starting to have questions coming in. Okay, Terry, do you want to field the questions?
Sure, I can go ahead and read that. This is from Lance Benner. So is NEO-SM the NEO Surveyor mission or the NEO Surveillance mission? Both names appeared in presentations this morning.
Okay, yeah, I know that has led to some confusion. The flight project, building the spacecraft, you know, doing all the things of a space, you know, the spacecraft mission, getting the data to the ground and all of that, that is the NEO Surveyor project. As those that work planetary defense and all the other things that are involved in tracking and characterization of NEOs. Just getting the data to the ground doesn't get everything done. And so the overall umbrella for that activity and how we get that all plugged into our network for planetary defense, that overall umbrella is the NEO surveillance mission.
We have a question for Jake from Paul Abel. Thank you, Lindley, by the way. For Jake, can you please speak to the possible connections for ISRU from the moon to small bodies?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something I probably should have highlighted and did not. So thank you, Paul. Yeah, so one of the main research goals with Artemis will be trying to enable sample return. That's one of the number one things that SMD has communicated with us that they would like to see from Artemis. So one of the reasons we want to go to the South Pole is access to volatiles, which requires some form of cryogenic sample return. So right now we're actually going through an assessment of what capabilities we have that can bring home cold material. It's kind of starting with an understanding of what we already do at ISS. So there's a life science aspect to this. There's also a geological science aspect to this. And we do keep things cold on the ISS sample-wise for sample return, but that's probably not the same as what we're going to need to do, which will involve much colder temperatures on the lunar surface. So I think that's actually a tremendous overlap with a number of activities that are either proposed, discussed, or potentially expected to be happening as we explore out in the solar system. So I think that is an area of good overlap with the SBAG community. So we have to figure out how to do that for Artemis across several platforms. As you saw from my slides, you know, a sample may go from from a traverse on the lunar surface carried by an astronaut or on one of those vehicles to the human landing system, potentially up to the gateway, and then through Orion back to the Earth. So we have to figure out how that works, and we don't have that squared away just yet. So I think that's a great place for our communities to potentially interact, and especially if there's some knowledge to be shared with respect to work that's already been done for exploration under SBAG. So yeah, thanks, Paul. That was good. Thanks for bringing that up.
And I see, Dan, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, hey Jake, thanks for the presentation. Just to kind of follow up on what Paul was asking about with respect to ISRU, I think the processing of lunar regolith that we're going to be looking at has some similarities to asteroid regolith as well in terms of extracting valuable resources out of. So I think that's one area that Artemis eventually will get to as we start to do these larger scale experiments. It's different. Lunar regolith is different than asteroidal, different environment, gravity-wise, but there's a lot of similarities just in processing that dirty water.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. And I think, you know, all these things are intertwined, right? Because a lot of that then ties into some of the you know, potentially fine dexterity with telerobotics and you know, a lot of things that you know, you all have been thinking about as well for quite some time. So I think there are a number of threads there, common threads that go through what we might do on the lunar surface, but also what has been done and could be done as well by this community. So should definitely try to find those threads and work on them a little bit.
Nancy?
So I'm remembering that there was an announcement out about people to run ag meetings, and I don't know, maybe those proposals went in, or do you guys know anything like SBAG steering committee about how meetings will be run in the future? And you know, as hopefully, knock on wood, we continue to improve, are you guys having any thoughts on like virtual versus in-person meetings for SBAG in general?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, to answer the first one, there was a call that went out to run the ag meetings, and a number of good proposals got submitted. And in fact, maybe Tom can answer this better if he's still on. I guess the entity will be selected at some point, you know, in the near future. The other thing about virtual meetings, I think, yeah, you know, something is lost in the virtual meeting. We will definitely have, continue to have the virtual option open, I think, forever. I think that will be true. But I think we will probably have an in-person, we haven't discussed this explicitly, but I think we'll probably continue to have some kind of an in-person component to it. I think that's our plan. So Tom, did you want to speak about the, you know, the entities that have proposed to run the ag meetings?
Well, only to the extent that I can't say anything about it because the proposals are under review. So yes, the decision will be made at some point, and there are proposals that came in. But I agree with what you said, that you know, the future going forward has to provide better options for people who need to communicate with people that they're not in the same place as, right? So remote attendance of meetings of all kinds is something that we should have been doing much better at a long time before COVID, and COVID has become the forcing function. And so hopefully in the future we will have a much better hybrid environment mixed with people who are attending in person, attending remotely. I personally feel that, though, that there is so much value in in-person human communication that we need to have that. We need to have, you know, it would be just a tragic mistake, in my opinion, to cancel all in-person meetings because virtual is good enough, because I don't think virtual is good enough.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we can just see from the nature of the open mic sessions that during the virtual world, they've somewhat dwindled off. And I think that was really where most of the valuable stuff came out. So I think we will continue, to have a hybrid. Well, we will have a hybrid, which we kind of started, before the era of COVID, but never really got very functional. So I think we will have a hybrid meeting, possibly starting in January. That would kind of be our goal. Generally in January, we have a larger meeting, a longer meeting, and that would be a good time, conditions permitting, to start up having, and if NASA, does give us permission to start up with an in-person meeting. So someone is, Melissa Brucker is saying that she's been attending virtually for several years. Yeah, I think it's important to, realize that, there's a lot of value to virtual meetings. First of all, some people can't travel, because of family reasons or maybe health reasons. And then other people, may not have the funds, or, it also saves, carbon. It lowers your carbon footprint. So there's just a lot of good reasons to attend the meeting virtually, as well, as long as we have a core of people kind of on site, kind of aggressively doing things. Okay. Now is your time, folks.
Bonnie, if I may, I'm curious, Tom mentioned in his presentation some lessons learned from the early career observers at team meetings. And I was curious what some of those lessons have been, if he's ready to share.
Yeah, sure, Tarek. I can talk to that a little bit. So it's, in hindsight, you'll say this is just common sense. That first of all, you have to do, it's necessary for the team to do more than just say, okay, we've got 10 seats at our science team meeting, and we'll take applications and we'll choose these people, and you can just, we'll give you the Zoom link and you can get on and you can listen to what people talk about. And that obviously is not enough. You have to, it's necessary to engage with the participants in advance, make sure they have the background information, they have perspective. They need some presentations from a variety of people involved with the project, giving the overview of the project, how the science team is functioning, how it's organizing. I'm giving a talk to the dartboarders the Friday before the DART team to explain a little bit about what NASA headquarters' role is in mission management. Second thing is that it's necessary to give the participants the ability to communicate in real time with each other and with somebody who's assigned as sort of a guide, right? Somebody needs to be there to, in a real meeting, you'd be sitting next to the person, they'd be able to whisper questions saying, hey, what the hell did that mean? And you could give a quick explanation of what was just said. And then there needs to be a follow-up after on. There needs to be a decision up front of what are you going to do after the fact? Is there an intent to follow people, or is there an intent to allow the people who participate at one time to continue an association with the project in some way? All those decisions have to be made in advance so that there is really a beneficial outcome and tangible outcome at the end, not simply a throwaway experience for the group.
That's useful. Thanks, Tom, for that that context. Do you see this as something that NASA will encourage, or NASA would require? NASA will just leave it up to people to decide? How do you see that moving forward?
I think it's too soon to say, but I have not encountered anybody who thinks this is a bad idea yet. And so I think the intent is to really develop it and make it a widespread option. Whether it would be a requirement or not on future mission teams, it's too soon to say. But nobody thinks it's a bad thing so far that I've talked with.
There are some comments in the chat. This is pivoting back towards the virtual versus hybrid versus in-person. Michael Bush noted that retaining remote attendance is essential for accessibility. And Brent Barbie noted that the hybrid format is sensible, rational thing to do for various reasons espoused. And someone, I apologize, I don't recognize the name, but noted that schools in prior conferences has found that hybrid in-out makes the one poorer, makes one the poorer. So certainly I think it's something for the group to think about is does hybrid simply mean there's a WebEx or a Zoom line, or does hybrid mean there's some other opportunity for engagement from people who are attending remotely? Because we've had kind of the WebEx line open for a number of meetings, but I feel like there hasn't been the same level of engagement between the people who are on the line versus the people who are physically present. So that's a challenge I think that is addressable, but one that needs some thought. Oh, and Tom just noted that Juno is having a close approach to Ganymede right now, so go Juno. And I think we have 3 minutes before our scheduled break, so this is a great time to unmute and make a comment or put it in the chat so that we can address things. Dan, I see your hand.
Yeah, just a comment. I mean, the one downside, I think the note about the public school saying, makes one the poorer, is when there's an option, then people, they plan accordingly. The one concern, because I think it's a good idea to have the hybrid, but the one concern would be, will institutions start saying, well, you don't really need to travel. We're not going to fund that because you can do it hybrid. If that isn't an option, then they can't say that. So if they want you to attend, so just something to think about, maybe at least to express the extreme value of in-person, face-to-face, and being the preferable way to do it, and only using the hybrid, like Bonnie said, when someone has, a conflict, a personal, family, or health consideration, but to really emphasize that the institutions should continue to support the in-face meetings to the greatest extent possible might be beneficial.
And Jesse Dotson said very much the same thing in the chat as you were talking about a need to.
Hey, way to go, Jesse.
So.
She and I think alike. Thanks.
Yeah, and then Dan also comments that, Dan Adamo also comments that some people don't have a travel budget at all. And I think also if we continue virtual, we might be able to get whole new cohorts like, high school teachers or the amateur community, that sort of thing, people who do have a zero travel budget. Okay, any final comments or questions before we break for our East Coast lunch? Okay, it's now 1 o'clock on the East Coast. Okay, could hybrid meetings include a pure virtual component? I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean, yeah, Tim, I don't understand what that means. If it's purely virtual, how could it be a hybrid? We have another open mic this afternoon, so we could pick this discussion up then. I do want to give people time for lunch, so breaks. So why don't we convene then, or break, not convene, break until 1:45 Eastern time, 10:45 Pacific time. I think was that. I just want to check and see, make sure that was what I said on our schedule. Yes, that's what we're going to pick up with Lance Benner talking about a planetary radar update. So let's break until 1/4 to the hour. Thank you, everyone. Successful meeting so far.